You're probably looking for ways to, cut through all the noise and really get to the heart of what matters.
Right. To understand things quickly, maybe get some new insight.
Exactly. And that's what we try to do here. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Claw to be diving in.
Today, we've got some really interesting material. It's focused on something called The Last Line, Awakening Nigeria's Diaspora Warriors.
And this whole concept, it introduces the Nigerian ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly that. So the sources we have, they look like excerpts, maybe foundational text or communications for this movement.
Seems that way. So our mission today really is to unpack this Nigerian ecosystem based purely on these texts. What's its core idea? What are the goals, the methods they're proposing?
And look, if this is the first time you're hearing about it, don't worry. We're going to break it down, make it clear without hopefully overwhelming you.
Let's do it.
Okay, so first off, defining this Nigerian ecosystem, the source calls it a global platform connecting citizens and the diaspora.
To reform governance, promote truth, and dismantle corruption. That's quite a mandate.
It is. And what really jumped out at me was the comparison they make. They liken it to Bitcoin.
Right. As a decentralized, living, breathing organization with no central command. Well, that's a very specific analogy.
It is, isn't it? Calling itself the conscience of the people. What do you make of that Bitcoin comparison just initially?
Well, it signals resilience, I think.
Okay.
A structure that can't easily be shut down because there's no single head, like crypto.
Mm-hmm. Decentralized.
It implies distributed power, maybe empowering lots of individuals or smaller groups rather than a top-down hierarchy. But the immediate question that raises for me is, okay, how do you coordinate that?
Yeah, how do you keep everyone pulling in the same direction with no central command? That's a big challenge for any decentralized effort.
Definitely something to keep in mind as we go through this.
Okay, so let's shift to the tone. The opening welcome note, it's intense, very direct, very urgent.
Oh, yeah. It talks about a historic awakening, and it's aimed right at Nigerians in the diaspora, specifically those who still believe, who haven't lost hope.
Calling them to rise together across borders, across generations. What was your main takeaway from that initial call?
Just the sheer scale of the ambition, really. The goals laid out are huge. Rebuild what politics has broken, what greed has wounded, and what division has stolen.
That's powerful language.
It is. It paints a really stark picture of the challenges, but it's also, designed to mobilize. That kind of emotional appeal is often vital, especially for a diaspora audience that feels that strong connection from afar.
And it's not just talk, right? There's that immediate practical call. Subscribe, share, visit www.nigerianecosystem.com.
Right. Build the network, get involved now. It's not abstract.
Which leads right into their justification, the why movements like this are overdue part.
And here they argue these movements are born in pain, that they happen when silence becomes betrayal.
So a sense of deep frustration, like things have gone too far, and not acting is basically complicity.
Exactly. That tipping point idea.
And they state it plainly. Nigeria is bleeding not just economically, but spiritually. That's quite a diagnosis.
It is. And they suggest past efforts, prayed without planning, marched without mobilizing, weren't enough.
So the implication is a need for a more strategic, coordinated approach. Not just passion, but planning. Driven by, survival, as they put it.
Which then connects directly to why they think the diaspora has to lead. The next section, why diaspora Nigerians must lead the charge.
Yeah, the argument that distance brings clarity and responsibility. What do you think about that? Does distance always bring clarity?
That's a good question. I mean, maybe. Perhaps being outside the day-to-day struggle allows for a different perspective, less bogged down in the immediate crises.
A broader view, maybe?
Possibly. And the responsibility part suggests, those who've perhaps found stability or resources elsewhere feel an obligation to help.
The metaphors they use are striking, too. We are the architects. We are the bridge. It's a very active, constructive role they envision.
Very proactive. And then there's that line about accountability. Ooh.
Which one?
History will not remember our excuses, only our execution.
Ah, right. No points for trying, essentially.
Yeah.
It's about results.
Pretty stark. Puts the pressure on.
So naturally, they have to address the feeling of overwhelm or discouragement. The myth of hopelessness.
Yeah, they tackle that head on, rejecting the idea that Nigeria is too broken or that change is impossible.
The existence of this whole initiative is basically proof they don't believe that, right?
Exactly. It's a counter-narrative to despair, saying as long as people, especially the diaspora, stay engaged, there's still hope. It's a necessary piece, really, for morale.
And that ties into the unity message in uniting across tribes. They call labels like Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, tools they use to divide us.
Mm-hmm. And they propose this unifying identity within the ecosystem. We bleed one color. Nigerian.
Okay, so what are the upsides and maybe the difficulties of trying to build a movement purely on that shared national identity, especially in a place as diverse as Nigeria?
Well, the upside is huge, potentially. Overcoming those ethnic divisions that have, caused so much trouble historically, fostering real collaboration.
Right.
The challenge, though, is doing that without erasing or disrespecting the very real cultural diversity that exists. It's a balancing act. How do you unite without homogenizing?
That's tricky. It's interesting then how they pivot away from standard politics and why waiting for leaders is a trap.
Yes. The message there is all about individual power. You are the leadership you seek. Stop waiting for a hero.
It's about activating people, not just having them follow.
Yeah, democratizing leadership, basically. It's a classic grassroots approach. They say movements succeed when the ordinary step into the extraordinary. It's about collective individual action.
And building on that, the section on rebuilding Nigerian values, truth, honor, sacrifice, they argue you can't fix a broken nation with broken values.
Makes sense.
Why do you think they focus specifically on those three? Truth, honor, sacrifice.
Well, they seem to directly counter major reported problems, don't they? Truth against tribalism and misinformation, honor against corruption, maybe the hunger mentioned, sacrifice against selfishness.
So it's like laying down a new ethical foundation.
Exactly. A moral compass for the movement and the society they want to build.
Okay, this next bit is crucial. Why the ecosystem is not a political movement. They're very clear about this.
Very explicit. They use words like tribal, but maybe in the sense of deep belonging, not ethnicity and spiritual, calling it a resurrection of Nigerian consciousness.
So, not about running for office or forming a party. How do you read that positioning?
I think it suggests they believe the core issues are deeper than just who's in power. It's about mindset, culture, identity.
A fundamental shift.
Yeah. And maybe it's also strategic, to avoid getting bogged down in partisan politics or being easily dismissed by existing political groups.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it connects to how one Nigerian can still make a difference. The idea that one Nigerian with courage is a majority.
That's a powerful line. It really emphasizes individual resolve.
And the follow-up. Crowds do not make movements. They are made by individuals who refuse to quit.
Mm-hmm. Again, reinforcing that theme of personal agency and just sheer persistence. It's empowering, especially when facing huge problems. It says your individual effort matters.
Then they circle back specifically to the diaspora in the sacred duty of the diaspora.
Right. Acknowledging people left often for survival, but arguing that connection remains. You carry Nigeria in your blood.
And that connection comes with an obligation, they say. More than just feeling bad about the situation.
Exactly. The text says the diaspora owes Nigeria more than pity. It owes a plan.
A plan. So strategic input, resources, action, not just sympathy.
Leveraging what they've gained abroad for the benefit of home.
And then they offer some practical next steps in building the ecosystem. Step by step, look at your state, find your team, find your mission on the website.
Yeah, trying to make it concrete. How do you actually plug in?
They say the ecosystem isn't a slogan, it's a blueprint.
Which implies structure, action steps, a thought-out process. It's important to show people how to move from agreement to actual involvement.
This leads nicely into from frustration to action. Two key lines here. Frustration without action is surrender.
Ouch. Yeah.
And action without unity is suicide.
Wow. Okay, so the ecosystem positions itself as the solution to both problems, giving frustration a direction, and ensuring that action is unified, not fragmented.
Makes sense. Channeling the anger productively.
And preventing self-destruction through division. It highlights the need for both motivation and coordination.
And then the conclusion, this last line. Talk about raising the stakes.
Seriously. If we fail here, there's no backup plan. That's incredibly high pressure.
But it flips to aspiration at the end. If we succeed, generations unborn will call us the generation that chose to rise.
It frames the whole thing in very stark, almost existential terms. Failure is catastrophic. Success is historic. A powerful closing.
So let's try and wrap this up. Based on these texts, the Nigerian ecosystem seems to be a diaspora-driven initiative.
Definitely diaspora-led, yeah. A grassroots movement focused on fixing governance, pushing for truth, tackling corruption.
But not as a political party. More like a
Ugh.
societal movement, focusing on unity beyond ethnic lines, individual action, and these core values.
Right. And powered by this sense of urgency and a belief that, especially those outside Nigeria, have a unique responsibility to act.
Key takeaways seem to be that individual agency, overcoming division, rebuilding values, and this idea of the diaspora's duty.
I think that covers the core tenets we've seen in the text: rejecting hopelessness, demanding execution over excuses, and aiming for a fundamental shift in consciousness.
And that final thought they leave us with, that this is the last line, really hammers home how critical they believe this moment
It
is.
absolutely does. It's a call to action framed as possibly the last chance.
Well, if this deep dive has sparked your interest and you want to see the source material or learn more, the website mentioned throughout is www.nigerianecosystem.com.
Right. The call to action was pretty clear. Subscribe, share, be counted.
Indeed. And we'll end with their motto, which encapsulates much of what we discussed. Together, truth, unity, action. Nigeria shall rise again.